So, we are going to start our lesson 4 about time travel, and we are going to continue to add new concepts. Some of them are just common sense, and some other concepts are more speculative, and the idea is that we hope to bundle all these concepts in something likely to be beautiful and to build up a theory. And we are going to let apart for a while our diagrams from the first lesson. We're going to talk about information and how information travels through time. And so there's a very easy way to send information in the future. In fact, we get information from the future always, every day. You can just put some information in a box, in a time box, and you just say that this information has to be disclosed in 10 years. So it can be a physical box or a numerical box. So you can compute it in a way that it reveals some data to other people. Or if you bury something and then somebody else finds it 100,000 years later, then the information or some some information has traveled in the future. So through these examples, we understand that it's really very easy to send information in the future. Each thing we do has an impact in the future. So some of this information we can control, and it allows to predict also stuff. So in fact, we send plenty of information in the future. Question is, will this information will be disclosed, so we can control this in some way. But the other question is it possible to send information to the past? So I would say it in another way. Would it be possible from now to get information from the future? Well, in fact, we do. In some way, we can do some forecasting. We talked about this previously. We can do some weather forecast that is very useful for agriculture. We can try to do some financial forecast, and forecasting is very important. And it's really a big part of the scientific activity, is trying to figure out what's going to happen, and then you can do things with this information. But in fact, when you forecast, you don't really retrieve the information from the future. You're just figuring out what the information could be. So this is why I'm putting this question mark here. You don't know exactly will it be shiny tomorrow, or will the stock markets rise tomorrow, or will something that I presume, if somebody I think he's supposed to come, will he really come? Sometimes our forecasting is really very likely, but sometimes not. But the idea is that we can do another type of forecasting, and the idea, so it's not, it's really a complete hypothesis, but then we shall ask ourselves, is this hypothesis possible, is that we could really retrieve information from the future. We could get information from the future, but real information, not forecasted information that can be true or not. So sometimes information is very likely. So you could say, okay, this is 90% likely and 10% or not likely. So you can have here yes and no. Will this happen? Will this be true at this precise time? Or on the contrary, if my forecasting is not very likely, my precision can really go from 0 to 100% certainty. But the idea is that could it be in a way possible to get some signals from the future? I mean something that is 100% sure. You are absolutely sure that this happened. So I mean, even if you could forecast something very likely. So just imagine we have a rendezvous, or you have a rendezvous with a friend in 1 hour at the cinema, and it's 99% sure that you will meet your friend at the cinema to see it usually works very well to give rendezvous, etc. But it's not 99, it's not 100%, because incredible things could happen. I mean, you could have an accident, you could have a meteorite breaking through the sky and crashing everything. You could have really very rare incidents, but it can't be 100%. You could reach a 99.999%, but still something could change it. But the question is something that is 100% sure. So something that in a way has already occurred, even if it's in the future. So this is the question. And let's suppose that yes. Let's suppose that we tend, you can have some very precise forecasting. Sometimes our forecasting can be, very low. So like, will the stock markets rise tomorrow or not? And we can't be absolutely sure, or not sure at all. It can be, like playing guesses or, playing, money games, gambling. And usually gambling doesn't work very well. So forecasting can range from 0. On the other way, 0.001%. You couldn't be sure something is not going to happen. But in fact, the same information tending to 0 is the same than tending to 100%. It's the same in terms of information. Okay? In terms of information, 0% is an information. Something you are absolutely sure something will not happen. So, in fact, we know some things couldn't happen if they disobey to some physical rules. For example, if I just let this pen fall to the ground, it's completely impossible that it will start floating in the air, or just anything crazy could happen. You can sense that the physical rules, whatever they can be, even those that are unknown, still make some events non-likely to happen. These events couldn't happen. So we figure out that yes, obviously, non-events are sure not to happen because they would break physical rules. But we're not interested in this. We are interested in, events that could or could not happen. And the idea is that could this information be sent now? And the second question is, if yes, if this information can travel from the future to the past? Is it something, somebody, anything sending this information to the past, or are we retrieving this information, like, with some psychic powers or anything in this kind of stuff, like, okay, I'm seeing the future, like the ancient Greeks could do. They would take some kind of drugs in a cavern, and there would be that woman, and seeing the future, or in dreams, etc., like in a like mythology would describe it to be like. So would it be some kind of psychic power that would enable, through, I don't know, some kind of glimpse hole, through a glimpse hole, to fetch this information? Or is it more something that we couldn't choose to fetch? In fact, we choose to forecast. When we forecast, when we do some calculations. For example, if I throw a ball, I can calculate where this ball will fall. Where will a cannonball fall? But in that case, if we assume that 100% sure information could travel from the future, from the past, is it likely that we fetch the information in the same way as we would fetch this information, or would this information be sent? Would it need, in fact, to be sent? In fact, we will now switch back to our usual diagram and see how it could work now. So just let's figure out these two questions. So, can information 100% information from the future be sent to the past? We think that, well, why not? We can get pretty close, but we are never sure. But if we imagine that we are in the past of a present that is in front of us, we are, if we think that now is already in the past of something else, then why not? This could be possible. So second question is, could we be already in the past of something else? So let's get back to our diagram. So we have, remember, our lines. So we think that, for example, now is here, and that in fact now it could be here. We could be in the past of tomorrow, and we could be in the past of next year, and so on and so on. Another question is, how far does this green line goes? We haven't questioned this. We haven't issued this question before. The past, okay. And if we place ourselves on this green line, could we think that it would go, forever? Because if it goes forever, then all the future goes forever also. But we could think that in fact there is a real now somewhere. We can't say it's now is now. I mean, our sensation of time could be this following this green line, okay? And so we could just assume that our real now is something very far away, okay? But in fact, our sensation of time could be, any of these lines. Any. If I'm here, I would have the same sensation as here. And it's really dreadful, because everything is like already written. And I'm not choosing what I'm doing. I'm not choosing anything. if we say that here is the real now, then it would make another wall. We call this, remember, the void and the time wall. We said it could be, time wall number 1. And then we said we would have something called the time wall number 2. And why couldn't we have a third time wall? Time wall number 3. Okay. And here you just see that I've done a triangle. So there's no more infinite, because infinite is a real problem for the mind, for a human mind. It's very difficult to figure out what's infinite, especially in multi-dimensional worlds. And we would be, so much more comfortable, thinking about a finite world, even if, this time wall number 3 is still moving, but it's still a triangle. And in fact, all this triangle, would be what we could call the time. Time is not just this line, this line, this line, or any line, these lines, but it's everything, okay? And now that we've said this, we come back to our first question, and obviously, from here I could forecast. But, we said that, you couldn't forecast something happening in the void. So when I start forecasting, in fact, I'm just simply moving. So if I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen next year, or in 10 years, or in 100 years, or in 1,000 years, it's just like, I'm just moving. It's simple brain movement. And in fact, it's very easy for our brain to hoop. But in fact, we are focusing on one subject. So if I'm thinking about what will be the future of the humanity in 1 year, I'm thinking about something, very large. And I'm not thinking precisely where will I be or where will my neighbor be in 1 year. And in fact, the mind focusing follows, completely different paths. And so depending on, it's a little bit like, a computer with multi-threads. The brain would function according to several threads, and each thread could be, in specific ways. And, you could have perhaps people minds with, low number of threads that, that would be very concentrated in one place. But, other people that are always, dreaming and, that have all their thoughts scattered, from tomorrow, from next week, next year, or people never are thinking about the future, just living in the present. And when you live in the present, in fact, you are on this line. But it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that you are up of the time. In fact, time could be, much further on, and there's nothing that proves that we are here. Nothing, in fact. And this is the big question about time travel and time paradox, is that if we think, okay, I'm here, and so we come back to, classical physics. But if we think that we could be, anywhere inside this triangle, then plenty of things are possible. And one thing that is possible is that you could get some information that already exists, that is already 100% sure here. And my opinion is that you can't fetch this information. The information comes from the future, but you don't choose. You don't choose this. In fact, you can try to figure out, you can try to forecast, but you won't get this information. And in particular, if you are talking about complex information, information that will, concern high intellectual structures and abstractions, and for example, everything that comes with science and art, you know, the geniuses, you know, geniuses often have the feeling that they aren't inventing or writing music, etc., but that, you know, they are just a vector. Something comes through them, and they are just exercising like a medium what the information that comes from somewhere. And where would this information come from? It would come from the future. So we are still now going to move a little bit further very quickly to how time travel could function. So we are talking about time travel of information and not physical things. Okay? In fact, the model that I would like to introduce would be the model of double connection. A little bit like when two computers are exchanging information, each computer has to confirm the reception. And so there's some kind of mechanism where you send some requests and then you get an answer, and then, okay, you can start communicating. Like, I don't remember exactly, I think it's something called ACK or never mind. But idea is that it could function very likely in terms of exchange of information. This is why it would be so difficult, in fact, to get information from the future, is that you would need a double connection. You would need, in fact, to have a canal opened in both ways, in fact. So you couldn't get information from the future if you are not